Apologies. We go to agenda item 1, the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 14th of July, 2021. Are those agreed? Agreed. Thank you. I will sign those in due course. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. No? None? Thank you. Agenda item 3, public participation. None? Agenda item 4, announcements. Now, I have a rather special announcement this evening for a member of our staff. And I'm delighted to inform Council that at this year's Chartered Institute of Housing Annual Conference, our Group Manager for Strategic Housing, Natasha Beresford, won the National Award for the Inspirational Colleague of the Year. Well done. Well done. Thank you. This followed submissions from our staff as a special contribution made by Natasha during what has been an extremely busy and stressful time for staff and our vulnerable residents. It is a tribute to Natasha in particular, but also to the staff who've kept services running so effectively in what has been a very trying time. Fiona Williamson and Councillor Margaret Griffiths were also shortlisted at the awards. On behalf of members, I would like to say congratulations to Natasha and our housing team at Decorum. Natasha, if you please step forward, I'd like to meet you on the floor. Councillor Griffiths, I believe you would like to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it was just to, sorry, I do apologise. It was just to congratulate Natasha. It was very well deserved. She works extremely hard, way above, as do a lot of her housing colleagues. But this is a chance to celebrate that externally, not just internally with us saying that. We knew it, and it's just wonderful for her to have received that at the Chartered Institute of Housing Awards. It's very well deserved, and congratulations again.
Councillor Tindall, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to echo Homelessness Forum, and so I know how valuable she is, and I think the whole team deserve our support and thanks for a marvellous unit.
Thank you, Councillor Tindall. Moving on to 4.2, announcements by the Chief Executive.
No announcements from me, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Announcements by the group leaders and apologies for absence. Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to offer apologies for Councillors Harden, Guest, Williams and Sutton. Thank you.
And now, announcement. No. Apologies, Councillor Tindall, sorry. I just didn't come up on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And on behalf of the opposition, unfortunately, we've got some of our people who've actually contracted or have had to be tested for COVID. So can I apologise for Councillors Friedman, Warner, Utley, McDowell and Allen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tindall. I now move on to announcements from the council leader and members of the cabinet. Now, I understand the deputy leader is deputising for the leader because he's away. Councillor Griffiths, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I only have one item under the leader's comments, and that was that in regard to the recent Olympics, both para and the first one, and that is to congratulate Jess Stratton for again being selected to represent the UK, a resident of Dacorum, and obviously to Max Whitlock, our freeman of the borough, who has also represented us very, very well, winning another gold medal. It's just amazing. So thanks to both of them. And obviously, if there's anybody else that we're not aware of that represented our country at any event, in the public, I mean, if they could make themselves be known, because obviously we'd like to celebrate their success as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. I believe also, Councillor Griffiths, you are going to be providing us with the next submission on corporate and contracted services.
I am indeed, Mr. Mayor. I just wasn't sure if there was any questions on the list. Not that I'd have been able to answer them, but I'd have given it a go. On the corporate and contracted services, I do have an update for you, which is that the Berkhamsted Sports Centre, the key work streams focusing on the facility, mix, highways, sustainability, the 3G pitches, and the residential opportunities have all been developed, and further workings are now happening with the members' working group, Berkhamsted Town Council and everyone active. A report will be presented to scrutiny committees and Cabinet in November with a project update. Members will have noted that works are well underway on the access and movement project around the Water Gardens car park, with completion targeted for early October. Officers continue to monitor progress on the customer usage data for our leisure centres, which is seeing a positive increase since reopening in April, and in early August was up to 12,000 visits per week from nearly 8,000 in early April. Happy to take any questions, Mr. Mayor. But there may be written answers.
Any questions for Councillor Griffiths? No? I beg your pardon, Councillor Symington, right at the back of the room, sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. I just wanted to pick up on your comments about the Berkhamsted Sports Centre. You mentioned as part of the works programme, the residential opportunities. My understanding is that these are an option and part of it, but not definitely inherently part of it. So my question is, if this is what's happening, will you be consulting the wider community about placing residential dwellings on the sports centre site? Thank you.
I think Councillor Symington is on the working party, but I may be wrong. And we're meeting on on Friday morning. Nothing is set in stone yet. in any part of this. We obviously have aspirations, we have ideas, we have suggestions. Some of it may be in, all of it may be in. I won't say none of it will be in, but nothing has been decided yet, and all of it will have to be consulted on at some point. So the answer is yes.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Any other questions for Councillor Griffiths? No. We move on to Councillor Barrett. Environmental Services, please. Thank you.
I'm on now, I think. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Clean, safe and green. Staff numbers continue to be under pressure and we are currently recruiting to fill a number of vacancies. 3 days of grass and hedge cutting on the A414 have been completed during August. As part of our ongoing training programme, 10 clean, safe, green operatives have passed a 1-day first aid training course. 4 operatives have passed a chainsaw cross-cutting and chainsaw maintenance course, and a further 3-day tree felling course to follow in December. And we have 4 clean, safe, green operatives who have been booked in for HGV training. Parks and open spaces. The Canal Fields play area tenders are back and the contract is in the process of being awarded. Also at Canal Fields, in conjunction with Herts Highways and Berkhamsted Town Council, a new footpath has been constructed and the footbridge refurbished. Work is continuing on developing the wildflower mapping information for the borough's website. And on Sunday, the 4th of July, a performance by the Impact Drama Group of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night took place in the Tring Memorial Gardens. Trees and woodlands. Progress is now being made on the Dundale Public Open Space Transfer Boundary issues. Together with the legal team and representatives from planning, the final boundary issues are being resolved in preparation for ownership to be transferred to the borough. Initial meetings with representatives from Herts County Council have taken place in order to anticipate the potential impact of ash dieback on the use of public highways. Further site-specific meetings will be taking place over the coming months. Meetings have also been instigated by officers with Herts County Council in order to discuss the rising costs within the ongoing tree maintenance contract. Environmental projects. As part of Zero Waste Week, we held a Zero Waste Day in Hemel Town Centre with information on reducing waste and recycling correctly. We also worked with a local tailor offering discounts on repairs and alterations in order to encourage residents to reuse items. As part of Plastic Free July, officers presented a virtual plastic-free and what to go in our bins talk, posting 23 posts on our social media channels with tips to reduce the use of plastics. Officers attended a community day at Fig Tree Hill. The day was organised by Housing, who arranged for 2 skips to be made available for residents to dispose of waste. Officers had the opportunity to meet with residents and discuss and encourage reuse and recycling. Classroom food caddies have been delivered to all primary schools in readiness for the Monsters on a Mission food recycling in schools scheme. We've also delivered Monster feature stickers with the caddies together with information on the scheme to teachers. The idea is that children decorate their class caddy as a teacher's pet monster, which will then be fed with food waste. Classes will then send pictures or videos of their teacher's pet monster, which will be entered into a competition. Entries will be posted on social media channels during Halloween week, and the public will vote for their favourite monster. Please Google Decorum Monsters on a Mission, which will take you to a link which is very informative, gives a very informative and entertaining presentation of the scheme. Waste services. As members might imagine, there is potential for the service to be under pressure as a result of the national shortage of HGV drivers. I can confirm that officers from Waste Services and Finance are working with other councils and unions discussing active measures that can be taken in order to mitigate the potential effect this could have on our services. In the meantime, I can confirm that all services are currently being maintained. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Any questions for Councillor Barrett, please? Councillor Tyndall, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Barrett, I've been contacted by a number of residents who are remarking on the amount of... I've been contacted by residents who have been complaining about the amount of grass growing through the surfaces of footpaths and various other areas, particularly slabs, but also tarmac. I just wondered, has the council got any plans to take action to reduce the level of the grass that seems to be growing, partly, I think, because of the various climate changes we've had. The rain plus the reasonably hot weather, I think, has stimulated anything that's green.
Programme to clear the grass, but I agree with you, it is becoming more visible, and it's certainly an issue that I will be taking up with officers, so hopefully we can make an improvement.
Councillor Timmis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, no, I can't get this one. Thank you, Mr. For the monsters is being rolled out to all schools throughout the whole of Dacorum or just in Hemel Hempstead?
I believe it's just somewhere in the Hemel area at the moment, but that is something I was going to check because, like you, I would like to see it rolled out across the whole borough. But I will check it and confirm that.
Thank you. Councillor Symington, please.
Thank you very much. Oh, golly, I haven't quite got used to this. Okay, thank you, Councillor Barrett. On a similar question, actually, to Councillor Tyndall, to do with the very strong growth we've had this year from the way that it's been warm and wet. So this is to do with trees. I understand that there are 950 outstanding tree orders, and the budget's not sufficient to complete all the works we've got for them. So I wondered what the council's policy is on prioritising and dealing with these are.
Thank you, Councillor Symington. I'm not actually aware of 150 outstanding tree orders. Could you elaborate on that? Where did that information come from? Or please.
No more questions for Councillor Barrett? Councillor Symington, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't actually hear the answer, but if I can just, so I'm not quite sure what it was, but the supplementary question is, not, as I said, it's hard to ask this because I don't know what the answer to the first one was, but given that, as far as I understand it, there's not sufficient budget to cover the number of tree orders we already have, which I think I'm told is 950, obviously it's a large number, but moving on from that, there is a category of tree pruning, category D, which comes under community concerns. And there is actually, this isn't funded at all at the moment. Well, obviously the number of community concerns has really risen very considerably. And given that it is our role as a council to address community concerns, I wondered if the council could look at funding some of these, the pruning of some of these trees.
Thank you, Councillor Symington. So the answer to the first question was that I was not aware that there was any budget shortfall of, I thought you said 150 trees, I think you then said 950 trees. But I'm not aware of any budget shortfall, so if you could elaborate on that information, either now or afterwards, if you want to send me an email, I can take that up, but to say I'm not aware of that. In terms of the tree pruning at the moment, unfortunately we only have resource to deal with trees that present any sort of danger to the public or to the trees themselves. Possibly that situation may change in the future, but at the moment there is only budget to deal with trees that are currently a safety issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I think Councillor Hollinghurst had a question first. Then I'll come to you, Councillor England. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Recently, I've managed to venture back onto public transport and had a very pleasant bus ride along the old A41, as I call it. And coming into the town, unfortunately, it became somewhat noisy and scary because the trees overhanging the roads haven't been cut back sufficiently to clear the top deck of a double-decker bus. So could I ask, can some thought be given to the clearance required for double-decker buses on the routes around the town? And I suppose also HGVs, if anybody's seen any recently.
Thank you, Councillor Hollinghurst. I think that the trees along the A41 are in fact the responsibility of Herts County Council or the Highways Authority. The trees are certainly not the responsibility of the borough.
In order, I believe, correction, I believe Councillor Hollinghurst was referring to what he calls the old 41, which is the, it's not the major arterial road that we, Councillor Barrett thought of, but the old road that goes through the various towns and which I believe is our responsibility.
Thank you. Councillor Hollinghurst.
Thank you. A supplementary question, if I may.
Yes, please.
The trees along the old A41 are also Herts Highways, not the borough.
Point of information, I did refer to bus routes around the town in general, because I'm sure that along the 500 route, they're not the only trees that are causing problems. But I would like to ask about the agency agreement which this borough has with the county council to be responsible for us, the borough council, to be responsible for highway verges. And they're the source of the trees and the branches. So I think that if I understand the agency agreement correctly, we do have some responsibility for some overhanging branches at least. And if that's a partial answer, that in some roads it's this and some roads it's that, could I be provided with a map showing exactly the extent of the verge agreement that we have with county?
Thank you, Councillor Hollinghurst. Any more?
Thank you, Councillor Hollinghurst. I understand that trees on all roads are the responsibility of Herts Highways, not the borough. And we do not maintain those trees. I beg your pardon. We do maintain them, but we're advised or informed by Herts Highways on what we should do and what we shouldn't do as far as those trees are concerned.
You could accept some advice from me, who was faced with a very noisy bus ride only a few days ago.
Thank you, Councillor Hollinghurst. Councillor England. We have just 1 minute left. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does the portfolio holder agree with me that the Clean, Safe and Green and the Waste Services team deserve our vote of thanks for managing in the circumstances of the workforce crisis which has engulfed the country this summer for some reason? Talking about wildflowers, does the portfolio holder agree with me that these have been a qualified success, but in some places they have looked rather wilder and less flowery?
Thank you, Councillor England. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor England. Absolutely, I agree with the Green Safe team. All the staff at the borough working for the borough have done a superb job over COVID, and you know, we should be recognising that across all our employees. As far as the wildflowers are concerned, I agree. Some of the planted wildflowers have looked better than the areas that have been left for wilding. But as we roll out planting more wildflowers, then I believe that those areas will look more interesting and we will have more colour. And they'll certainly be an improvement.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. We've run out of time for discussion on that particular item. Could I call upon Councillor Banks, please, regarding community and regulatory services? Thank you, Councillor Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Turning first to environmental health, our teams have supported the Red Quarantine Hotel in the area and have visited weekly to ensure that the COVID risk assessments are in place and have offered to support with compliance. The environmental health teams have inspected the hotel receiving Afghan families too in their temporary accommodation here in Dacorum with initial quarantine and are ensuring that the legislative measures are in place to protect the health of these families using this accommodation. It goes without saying that a lot of the environmental and health team's time is taken up with COVID, and I congratulate staff on their resilience and dedication to both their day job and their COVID response in these extraordinary times. A fly tipping update. 11 fixed penalty notices have been served for fly tipping offences, 1 fixed penalty notice for duty of care offence, and 7 fixed penalty notices for littering offences. There are 6 pending prosecutions and 1 successful prosecution, resulting in a 6-month conditional discharge, an £85 and a £22 victim surcharge. You have been warned. The teams continue to inspect all fly tips for evidence, and we are still using our covert cameras placed in hotspots throughout the borough, and these are proactively checked regularly. Mr. Mayor, I would like to thank everyone involved in supporting the climate emergency agenda, and I would actively encourage members and residents to check out the DBC website and the Countryside Management Services via Herts County Council website for information on cycleways, walk routes and all activities green. The Public Space Protection Order and Littering Enforcement Pilot Contract, this has now been approved and awarded to the District Enforcement Limited. Information from this pilot will be used as part of the Public Space Protection Order review that is now due July next year. This zero cost to the Council 12-month pilot will, where we have failed to educate or encourage better behaviours, provide us with the information on the best way to enforce littering and the public space protection orders in the future here in Dacorum. I look forward to updating members on that progress in due course. Mr. Mayor, turning to community, this month I would like to highlight 2 projects amongst the many. The Healthy Hub. These continue to be there continues to be an increase in residents who are approaching the Healthy Hub and asking for support on issues like debt, physical activity, mental health and housing support. Residents can now find the Healthy Hub at the South Hill Centre, and plans are in place to identify other locations across the Dacorum as we move away from the virtual world. Community grants. The spring round of community grants has been completed, with 24 voluntary and community organisations successful in getting funding of including, I beg your pardon, Mr. Mayor, this is totally tongue-tied there. Organisations that have been successful in funding from DBC to deliver local projects. Some of the examples of successful bids have been health and fitness programmes for survivors of domestic abuse, creation of seating and planting areas in a recreational ground that's suitable for older residents, kit for small local sports clubs. There will be a further round of community grants in the autumn. We have also launched a COVID community grant to provide local groups with financial support to help them reopen and cover the bills and their costs that they would normally have met through fundraising. This acknowledges the huge amount of support provided to residents by the voluntary and community sector throughout this COVID pandemic. The current round is open and it closes in October. I would urge all members and local residents to spread the word in their wards to ensure that every local group or project that you are involved with or that you come across are fully aware that we have funding available, and further details can be found through the DBC website. Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to take questions.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Banks. Now, I think Councillor Adeleke is the first person for a question, please. Thank you, Councillor Adeleke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. At the beginning of the pandemic, the council, I think, employed a couple of marshals to be patrolling the streets to make sure that the residents follow the government guidelines. Will portfolio holder please explain what has happened to this marshal, whether they are still employed or whether they've been deployed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Adeleke. I believe you're asking about the employment contract for COVID marshals. I'd like to advise members that our COVID marshals, who have done an amazing job in offering advice and guidance, not only to residents, but also to local businesses, and indeed here this evening reminding us to keep our masks on. They are employed on a temporary 6-month contract, and they will be in post until January. Thank you.
Please, Mr. Mayor, I have a supplementary question.
Councillor Adeleke, yes, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, portfolio holder. Now, in view of the recent government announcements that we are likely to have a possible COVID outbreak in winter, does the council have in place any contingency plans?
Thank you, Councillor Adeleke. Could I just ask for the question to be clarified? What was the last part of that question?
I'm afraid I couldn't hear it very clearly myself. Sorry.
Okay, I will repeat my question. Okay. I said in view of the fact that the government is indicating that there might possibly be some COVID outbreak in winter, okay, and my question is, does our council here have in place any contingency plans?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Adeleke. Although I'm not absolutely sure that that's within my portfolio, I am very aware that Dacorum Borough Council are leading across the district and are very active in the forums that are looking at our COVID resilience and steps that would need to be taken to secure the security and safety of our residents. And I have no doubt that although we don't have our, tarot cards with us, that indeed we are planning for every eventuality, and that includes infection rates rising as well as falling. And members can rest assured that the council has that in hand.
Thank you, Councillor Banks. Councillor Tyndall, please.
Thank you. Would the portfolio holder agree with me, particularly with reference to the last question, that it's very government clears up the confusion left behind after its press conference the other day, when it's either plan A or plan B, and we're not sure which is it and what we're doing, and there may be another outbreak in a few weeks' time. Could I ask whether or not you could confirm that once the Prime Minister's actually made up his mind what he's doing and then tells local government, then we can actually plan to protect our residents?
Indeed, clarity from central government is absolutely critical. However, in the meantime, there's the business of the day, so ensuring the safety of our residents, and we will indeed find our way through.
Thank you, Councillor Banks. Councillor England?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could the portfolio holder give any numbers, interim numbers, in relation to the PSPO experiment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor England. Sorry, just that last part of the question. Sorry. I've got the PSPO. Can I give you figures? Any figures? Oh, full stop, just figures. not in relationship to the pilot, just general. Thank you, Councillor England. I don't have figures with me this evening. I'm happy to provide a written response.
Thank you, Councillor Banks. May I suggest that it might be appropriate if you could drop Councillor England an email with the figures? Thank you. Councillor England.
Thank you. A supplementary. I'll take this off. Get extra points from the COVID marshals for keeping it on during a question. In relation to the numbers, which may be available, how will those numbers be adjusted for the effects of social distancing restrictions that have varied somewhat during the period of the scheme?
My apologies, Mr. Mayor. Again, I missed the first part of the question this time. I do apologise, Councillor England. Just the first part of that question again.
Yes. So, given that we've... You switch off. Is that better? Right. Given that we've had various social distancing restrictions during the period of the PSPO trial, how will those figures be adjusted to be representative and useful in the future?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor England. The pilot hasn't begun yet. Once it is in place, the key performance indicators will be captured, and absolutely we will look to see if it's necessary to weight those findings because of issues around COVID security, whether it be social distancing or potentially places being closed down or not available for public space. And I will update full council at a later point.
Thank you, Councillor Banks. No more questions? Can we please move on to Councillor Anderson, please? Thank you.
Sorry, did I come on? Come back on again. On a very small point of order, I believe that an earlier question from Councillor England raised in the public forum was going to be answered by a written response. As it has been raised in a public forum this evening, could all councillors be appraised of the response rather than just the one person asking the question?
Thank you, Councillor Douris. I'm getting a nod of approval from Councillor Banks. Thank you. Councillor Anderson, sorry.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Interesting experience to appear on YouTube. Shame we didn't have it at the last meeting when members of the public could have seen members of the opposition voting against the administration's motion to complain to the government about the reduction of community involvement in planning applications. I've got 4 items to report tonight. The first one concerns the application of an emergency Article 4 direction in the Hemel Hempstead Town Centre. At the end of July, or actually with effect the 1st of August, the government introduced legislation to allow operators to convert retail floor space into residential development. And we and practically every planning authority in the country are very concerned about the threat this posed with our high streets, particularly the vulnerable ones, in that the idea of having residential development at ground level would have been a very, very bad thing. As a result of that, the council implemented an Article 4 direction at ground level in the centre of Hemel Hempstead. It started at the end of July. The consultation ran through with landowners and residents ran through August, and the council will consider the comments received and hopefully confirm the order shortly. Judging by the amount of planning applications to convert the floors above ground level, it is just as well the council did so. Under, if I can get this thing to work. My second item concerns the amount of filming activity in the borough. There's been a big increase in our local area, attracting everybody from Ricky Gervais to Steven Spielberg. Some members might be aware of the World War II footage that was filmed in the Old Town High Street, I think last week or the week before. It's a really good thing for our borough. We've decided to allocate some new staff resource to support the industry and to realise the benefits, both indirect and direct, both in terms of the amount of economic activity it generates in the borough, the way it promotes our local area. People can be watching it on TV thinking, oh, I know that, that's where I go shopping. And also obtaining income when it's filmed on public land. My third item concerns an illustration of the workload that the planning enforcement team are undergoing. There's been significant public concern about a stretch of open land southeast of Church Road in Little Gadsden. The land was sold in small plots, I was going to say pieces, in small plots, possibly to investors that were misled. The council implemented an Article 4 direction to prevent the development of these plots. Unfortunately, one owner has decided to challenge that, has developed fencing and buildings on it, and has ignored the council's enforcement action, including different kinds of stop notices. The council is mounting a High Court injunction. It will cost the council about £10,000, although we hope to recover some of the costs if we get, hopefully, the right result. Finally, Mr. Mayor, I didn't want to bring this issue up, but I think I feel I have to prevent it being hijacked by people whose business it isn't. There was some controversy last week concerning Watford's transport plan. Watford Borough Council has announced or consulted on a transport plan that includes in the appendix 10 to 12 schemes, varying in reality from those that are quite likely to those that could almost be called kite flying. Contrary to some bizarre claims made on Facebook, Dacorum did not negotiate to get a park and ride scheme on the Dacorum Kings Langley side of Junction 20 of the M25. We've never sought that, we've never tried to get it, and the claims to the contrary are bizarre. The leading Liberal figure from Three Rivers District Council really needs to produce evidence before she makes claims like these. And I think she was seeking to distract from the bigger issue in terms of what happens on the Three Rivers side of the junction, because if, to Three Rivers' credit, the motorway service area that we've been threatened with is defeated, it still leaves the future of that land in question. Dacorum has, our officers have communicated with Watford's officers about the transport plan, and we will be passing comment on it before the consultation period ends. We certainly do not support the idea of trying to put a park and ride on a high value piece of green belt preventing coalescence with a site of ancient monument in it. It's just not happening, and I think the claims made to the contrary are an illustration, I think, from one of the questions earlier about trying to get away with claiming things which plainly are not true without any evidence. I'm happy to take questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Townsend?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Two questions, if I may. One is about Article 4 and the other is about enforcement, and both of them are at Tring. On Article 4, I have much the same concerns about Tring High Street and indeed Aikman Street off it. And I was wondering if any consideration had been given as to whether we could have Article 4 for Tring or indeed Berkhamsted, because I have much the same concerns. So that's my first question. My second question concerns enforcement action or hopeful for enforcement action. The development called St. Francis House, which is in the west of Tring. I caught up with an officer today, and unfortunately, basically no progress has been made on the enforcement of this particular property. There's a path that should have been built, and it hasn't been built, and local residents are understandably very upset about that. And I think this lack of enforcement is a reflection of a lack of staff or a lack of resource in that department. And I just wanted to make sure he was aware of that, and perhaps he could comment on the actions he was taking to resolve that issue. So those are my two questions. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the circumstance in terms of asking for an article or direction for their high streets, we did consider that right at the start. The issue with Berkhamsted and Tring high streets is that they are also protected as conservation areas. They're also harder to convert into residential, and the threat just wasn't there, so it really wasn't necessary to do so. In terms of enforcement action, yes, our enforcement team have been under pressure. We have recruited to fill the vacancies. We've implemented a new triage system to prioritise cases, and they have to be prioritised on a public interest basis. I will look into the individual case referenced, but I would like to reassure members that everything that can be done is being done to resolve that backlog. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Tyndall, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. In the absence of Councillor Allen on COVID duty, could Councillor Anderson please confirm that all matters regarding irregularities in planning processes relating to LA3, which were raised by Bourne End Village Association in their email of 17th of November, 2020, have been looked into and dealt with appropriately?
Thank you. Yes, I actually replied to Councillor Allen's email. Very question. In my view, as far as I'm aware, due process has been followed, and I'm not concerned about anything outstanding. I think I'm at liberty to say that Section 106 agreement has been fully prepared and is with the signing parties to sign. Once that is received, the planning decision to permit planning permission will be sealed and will be made and sealed and sent, whatever planning will be granted.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank the Borough Council Planning Department for instituting a new service for the parish and town councils. We've recently had the second monthly meeting, a joint liaison meeting on Teams, where we, as parish council committee members, chairs and the clerks, are able to talk to the lead officers in the planning department. This is a new service. It's very welcome. The question I'd like to ask is, since we have to spend the weekends typically looking at plans, can we please be told when the servers are going to be down? We only have a weekend typically to look at the plans, a few days beforehand perhaps, but to find that you go into the web and it's shut down for the entire weekend, it would be helpful to know it beforehand.
I'm unaware of these instances and disappointed to hear about them. I will look into them and try to ensure they don't happen again.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. No more questions. Oh, beg your pardon. Councillor England, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry that the portfolio holder is disappointed that we weren't able to show this meeting on YouTube last time around. Is he aware that I've been calling for these meetings to be on YouTube for nearly 5 years?
The answer is no, I wasn't aware, but I think it's a good thing. It's a shame, as I said earlier, it's a shame we haven't had it earlier to demonstrate to members of the public of these proceedings. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Anderson. No further questions. Can we move on to Councillor Elliott, Finance and Resources, please?
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Starting with financial services. During July and August, the financial services teams had two main focuses. Firstly, the completion of the 2020-21 financial statements and overseeing of the external audit of these accounts by Grant Thornton. The audit has now been concluded, and the external auditor informed the audit committee last week that the financial statements had been produced to a high standard and with good quality supporting information. So I would like to thank the financial services team for producing this. Secondly, supporting the organisational service planning process and the detailed horizon scanning undertaken in relation to future service developments and delivery, this process has now led into the 2022-23 budget setting process that Finance will oversee over the next few months, prior to the final budget approval by Council in February. The financial reporting cycle has continued in 21-22, and the first quarter financial monitoring report has been published as part of the Cabinet agenda for next week. As businesses and industries are starting to reopen, the role of the Accounts Receivable Service in working with Council partners and creditors is becoming more challenging. And the need to work hard with these partners to find the right support mechanisms to support the local business economy are underway. Now, turning to commercial assets, despite the unprecedented challenges presented by the pandemic, the estates, building services and bereavement teams continue to deliver effective services to customers, operational buildings and commercial partners in a difficult period. The estates team continue to work with Public Health England, the NHS, Hearts County Council and other partners on the assessment and delivery of vaccine delivery sites, pop-up testing and vaccination sites, plus booster jab locations. The team also continue their partnership to work with commercial tenants to collect commercial property income and secure future tenancy payment plans, as well as letting vacant property. The financial performance of the commercial portfolio has been strong in the first quarter, and to date, the occupancy levels of the commercial portfolio remain high. The period of time from September to December will be critical for this service, as during that period, the 100% first quarter business rates relief for the retail, leisure and hospitality sector will have ended, as well as furlough. Now, moving to revenues and benefits, the teams continue to play an important role in providing financial support to local residents and businesses affected by the pandemic. Having reduced earlier in the year the number of applications for the test and trace isolation support payments, this has risen significantly over the last few months, but successful applicants are being paid within the average of just 5 days at present. The volume of test and trace payments are expected to continue to rise as the number of positive test increases rise over the autumn and winter period. The Council has now allocated 100% of the first two rounds of Additional Restrictions Grant, ARG, with over 95% of these funds being paid as grants directly to micro, small and medium-sized local businesses. During August, the Council has received an additional £1.4 million of the discretionary ARG grant to be allocated prior to the year end. Proposals on how best to support the local economy with these funds are being developed. And as of August, there are no longer any business rates-based support grants in operation, and at present, there are no government plans. There are no government plans the Council are aware of for new business grants to be administered. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will welcome any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Whitelow, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Graham, sorry, portfolio holder. In the UK at the moment, we're seeing something like 50 shops closing a day. Can you tell us what our own vacancy rate is here in Dacorum, please?
Thank you, Councillor Whitelow. The 50 shops you refer to are evidently UK-wide and not in Dacorum. As of Q1, commercial property occupation remains strong at 95.2%, achieving pre-pandemic KPI levels. The government's COVID moratorium during March 22, preventing formal legal debt collection of evictions, means although debt is being raised and reminders issued, the council has no legal challenge to assist in debt recovery. The obstacle, combined with financial difficulties of the pandemic, is having certain adverse impact on income collection levels. But the service is working closely with council's tenants to assess which businesses are struggling to pay as a result of the pandemic and assisting them where possible with affordable payment plans. So we're doing our bit to make sure our commercial tenants stay alive. Thank you.
Have a second.
Councillor Whitelow, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. My supplementary is, could you give an indication of what our arrears levels are on that?
Okay. The resulting volume of arrears of commercial property rent is circa 20%, whereas we would normally have a target of 8%. Although the performance is behind historic levels, it is in line with the 21-22 budgeted levels, as we did budget for an increase in arrears of circa 20%. So this is not creating a financial pressure to date.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Adeleke, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As normality is slowly taking place and we've started to see return footfall to the shopping center, how is the car park income faring now?
Well, as you can probably see from the report, the Cabinet report, there's a £330,000 pressure on car parking income. The income stream has been affected by restrictions imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in the early part of the year, where income was 27% down on budget. As restrictions have eased from mid-May, the income has begun to improve. We're now reckoning about 20% behind budget. However, footfall in the council car parks has not yet returned to pre-pandemic levels.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Adeleke? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you drive around, you still see that a lot of cars are still parked on the roadside, which is an indication that most people are still working from home. Do you see the car park income returning to pre-pandemic level?
Okay, yeah. Well, I suppose it's difficult to say, and will depend if there's been long-lasting behavioural changes. For example, as more people are used to buying online instead of visiting our high streets, you've also seen the problem with the department stores who have basically they've closed, so that can maybe reduce footfall. But it's uncertain, but we'll just have to see what happens. We don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately, on the retail sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Douris, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Elliott, my contacts in the construction industry tell me that materials and other costs are going up by as much as 30% per annum. In the light of this, can you tell me what impact those increases are likely to have on our capital programme?
With the capital programme, at present, construction projects are impacted by three main uncertainties: supply and cost of construction materials, shortage of supply of skilled professional tradespeople, and existing COVID working practices and uncertainty of future requirements. Clearly, the pandemic has affected the cost of materials coming from especially the Far East, especially with the cost of transport, especially with the hold-up at ports, which has increased prices. Now, these factors are making planning, procurement and delivery of capital projects more uncertain. But at present, the General Fund capital programme is still on track at Q1. There is 11% slippage projected for the housing capital programme, but that is within our normal parameters. Wrapping this all together, as Councillor Douris has said, we do expect to see a 30% increase in costs for near future programmes.
Thank you. Councillor Douris, do you have a supplementary, please?
That's why I stood up, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. Thank you for that answer. In view of that, are we taking the advantage wherever possible of setting contracts on a fixed price basis? And does that give us, as Dacorum Borough Council, as a prudent council, any security in terms of protecting us against unnecessary or unavoidable cost increases?
Yeah, we do contract our contractors on fixed price contracts. Clearly, there are contingencies built into it by the contractor. Clearly, they will, in future, build in inflationary pressures into those contracts. The indications that I'm seeing from the market is that it will take until spring 2022 for these price pressures to decrease. As we can see in the whole construction industry, concrete is very expensive, timber, and also the cost of skilled labour is putting pressure on contract prices. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hollinghurst, please.
Thank you very much. This council has been successful in the past in supporting small businesses, especially with start-up schemes. And we have a very good example on the big estate. In my ward, there's a small area off the Icknield Way, which is part of or adjacent to the industrial area. This was in the local plan for being developed for business and an extension of the industrial area. However, there are moves now to get that changed to housing. Could I ask if the borough could have a look at securing this land for the original purpose, which was for small business use, and see if we could duplicate some of our successful incubation schemes on that land off the Icknield Way.
Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, I'm back on now. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hollinghurst. I'm very pleased that you have looked at that, and maybe if you could give me some more details by email. I'm very keen to support businesses, start-up businesses in the borough, and I welcome you identifying that for me. So please send me an email and we'll get together and I'll maybe come and visit it with you and have a look. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. We've now used our allotted time for questions on that particular item. Can we move on to Councillor Griffiths and housing, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Under Tenant and Leaseholder Services, EROSH, E-R-O-S-H, the Sheltered Housing Accreditation, the supported housing team successfully completed the annual review of their outstanding award. Team morale, manager support and tenant engagement was highlighted as particular strengths, which is encouraging given the past 18 months. ISO 9001 certification quality management system. The improvement and engagement team facilitated the housing service certification visit with our ISO 9100 assessor. I'm pleased to report that we successfully achieved recertification with no non-conformities identified. The team were praised for continuing the certification process during the pandemic. Tenancy sustainment. The team continued to support vulnerable people to maximise their income. There has been recent examples of officers supporting a family to get a significant backdate of welfare benefits. Under strategic housing, as you will have witnessed earlier, Natasha Beresford, our Group Manager for Strategic Housing, won the award for the Inspirational Colleague of the Year at the Chartered Institute of Housing Conference. We have been successful in a grant funding application for Ministry of Justice ex-offenders to deliver a housing navigator scheme in partnership with Emerging Futures. Further successful grant applications to MHCLG for a rough sleepers accommodation programme. A move-on scheme has been proposed, which will be subject to planning consent. Engagement with voluntary sectors to compile supporting information and communication for ARAP, the Afghan Relocation and Assistance Policy, and a reduction in our rough sleepers in the borough to 3 through successful engagement and collaboration with Decorum Outreach and the Community Safety Partnership. Under Property in Place, the continued implications of the pandemic are continuing to put significant pressure on all work streams within Property in Place. This has been a repetitive theme for the last 18 months, as previously mentioned. Referring to an item asked earlier, however, we now have the added pressure of material and labour shortages and the implications within the construction industry of material price increase, which has dramatically changing week on week. Limited material availability, disruption to distribution of product, and the shortage of European labour. We are working very closely with our supply chain and partners to monitor this. All these issues add an additional level of complexity and challenge to an already difficult environment. The key focus in these difficult times is to ensure tenant safety in their homes at all times. All maintenance works streams are continuing with the reintroduction of a slightly reduced planned works programme. Stronger emphasis is being placed on empty home refurbishment to reduce letting times. Property in Place are just about to award phase 1 of a new stock condition survey programme on the housing portfolio to help assist the development of future delivery models for major works programmes. This information, compelled with our recent Energy Savings Trust exercise, will also start to map Decorum's requirements and vision to help tackle the climate emergency. Property in Place have developed a new joint charter with Osborne's, which focuses on the customer experience through a culture and behaviour change. This has also led to a co-location of staff approach to eliminate waste. This is being implemented shortly at the Osborne office. The cleaning service continues to work tirelessly to undertake its functions in these difficult times. Under housing development, we've been shortlisted for the following awards. The Evening Standards Awards, which is happening this Friday, the Martindale Fields Best Family Home. Inside Housing Awards, 4th of November, which is for Magenta Court, Best Urban Development Outside London. Sorry, Best Development Urban Outside London. And Best Development Team South. And the House Builders Award on the 24th of November, Magenta Court, Best Design for 4 stories or more. And we also have a new member of staff joining the team next month. And with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I will also give an update that I won't read out tonight. We'll just put in the agenda of all the current housing projects. Thank you.
Thank
Happy
you,
to take
Councillor
any
Griffiths. Councillor Symington, please.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths, and congratulations on all the new developments. My question relates to the existing housing stock, and of which there are quite a substantial number of the Decorum's houses are within my ward, and I am receiving quite a number of emails from people for whom are beginning to be affected by the COVID implications and what I assume becomes part of the £3.5 million underspend on repairs and maintenance. So how do we balance, can I ask the portfolio holder, how do we balance the expectations and general reasonable expectations of our residents, some of whom have been waiting more than 6 months to have repairs done to their houses?
Thank you, Councillor Symington. I think it's fair to say that everyone is aware of the issues that have happened over the last 18 months. Lots of industries have been unable to deliver the service that they would wish to deliver, and we are no different in that respect. We had to take the safety of our residents first. We are, after all, going into their homes. Some of our tenants didn't want us in their homes or didn't want Osborne in their homes, and we have to respect that. But it has caused a backlog. We are working through that backlog, but it is being prioritised on an urgency basis. You know, so if you have something that's quite significant, loss of heating, loss of hot water, loss of water altogether, things like that, then that will be far higher up the list than, say, a dripping tap. So it's a case of, we are aware of the issue. It's not that we've done it as a budget cut. The money is still there and will be delivered as soon as we possibly can, but we are prioritising how we deliver, which I think everybody would expect.
Councillor Beecham, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand that we are proposing to install ground and possibly air heat source pumps. This is a great initiative and one that I definitely support. My question to the portfolio holder is, do we have a feel for the cost and potential recovery timescales for the expense of converting some of our existing properties, e.g. flats, to this technology? And would it be within the lifetime of the many of our older and less maybe fuel efficient buildings? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As mentioned in my report, we are pulling together a complete stock condition survey and also with the Energy Trust work that we have done, so that in time we will be able to come to this council, or I will be able to come to council, with a plan of how we're going to implement all these changes that we need to implement. And it will be like, so that if there's a grant available, we can almost like reach up to the shelf and say, well, that will meet that grant requirement, because when grants become available, they normally have to be delivered in a very short time scale. And where we've been caught out in the past is perhaps by the time we've done all the due diligence in what we want to do, we're not ready to go and we can't deliver it in time. So that's the plan. We will come forward with a long-term plan on how we will, like we did with our Decent Home Standard. It'll be on the same vein. But I can let members know that we are working at the moment to tap into the huge grant that the government has made available for this sort of thing. And we are actively putting in a grant to get some heat source pumps in almost immediately. They won't do the whole stock. It'll be a small amount, but it will be a start.
Thank you, Councillor Beecham. Councillor Adeleke, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I would just quickly like to congratulate the portfolio holder once again for the successes and the achievements of the housing team, because it's all happening under your watch. So well done. But I want to congratulate you again on the new bills that have been taking place in the borough. Will the portfolio holder please advise us what is the medium to long-term plan of the council about the new bill, given the economic uncertainty and the pandemic that we've just been through? Thank you.
I do apologise, Councillor Adzaliki. I didn't catch the middle bit. Something about the economic development and the residents, but I didn't catch the key part of what you were asking me.
Yeah. No, I said, given the economic outlook that is very uncertain at present, will the council continue with the current rate of the new build, and what is the medium to long term plan of the council? Thank you.
Thank you. I do apologise for not catching what you said. Yes, we will continue with what we have already set out as our plan. We may have to tweak that depending on supply chain and those sorts of things, but certainly, if any of you have read the Cabinet agenda for next Tuesday, you will see that we're asking for land holdings to be transferred from the general fund to the housing account so that we can start putting planning permission, etc., for those particular sites. So there is no let up, there's no foot off the throttle or anything else on our house building, because we desperately need homes for the people that are on our register.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Madden, please.
Many thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to pick up on the homeless, the numbers that you quoted. So you said that we're down to 3 in Dacorum. That's absolutely fantastic. And I'd like to just know how that compares with, say, 2 years ago, before COVID, if you could possibly. I expect you probably can't tell me that right off top of your head, but thank you, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Madden. I don't have those figures, Hannah. I'm not very good with figures, I'm afraid. So I will give a written answer to that, Mr. Mayor, and to everybody. But it is through sheer hard work through our staff, and they are working with those people as well. Just because they come up on the stats doesn't mean to say we've given up on them. We will continue to work, but it does take a long time for the trust to develop, because sometimes these people have they've been through some hard times, and obviously we need to give them all the support we can and understand their situation, and obviously their trust has to be built up. So nil would be fantastic, and we are working towards that, but every day it changes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ransley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Griffiths, I'm aware of the issues that we have with cleaners, but I would like to draw people's attention to the fact that those of our vulnerable residents who live in sheltered housing, their lounges are still closed since the beginning of the pandemic. They were open for a week, government rules changed, and unfortunately, as a council, we've been unable to keep up with those terms. I'd just like to ask, is there any possibility of them opening soon for their mental health and their physical well-being? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ransley. Whilst I do totally understand exactly what you're saying, I know quite a lot of our residents in our schemes, it is striking that balance between their safety and the safety of our staff and all the residents that would come into the areas. I can't give you a categoric, yes, it's going to open next week or the week after. It will depend on how much staff we have to keep cleaning those very high, if they are used, they are very high functional areas, and they need a lot of cleaning to make sure we keep our residents safe. We have been, I was going to say fortunate, but we haven't been fortunate. We've planned and tried to take great care that we haven't had mass outbreaks in our homes, as we've seen across, slightly differently, but in homes where people of a very vulnerability have suffered terribly. We have, like I said, I don't like using the word fortunate because I think it's through planned and sheer hard work of our staff that we are still in the situation that we are in. And I will be guided by what we get from Public Health England and the advice we are getting from the people that in far better know than I am, and including the staff and how they feel about opening those up and the risks it puts them in before we will open that up. Bearing in mind, I do understand the stress, the mental well-being of the residents who live there. So I can't give you a categoric answer, but I am conscious of this issue.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. That's now the end of our allotted time for questions of the portfolio holder. We now move on to agenda item 5, a motion proposed by Councillor Adrian England. Councillor England, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask for guidance? Do I speak on the motion now, or should I ask for a seconder first?
I believe you need a seconder now, please.
I believe Councillor Barrett is willing to second.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would like to second the motion and thank Councillor England for bringing the motion to Council. I confirm that we're fully supportive of the content, and as such, I'm happy to write a letter as proposed. Further, as a measure of the importance we attach to the subject, I will be asking the leader of this council to join me in signing the letter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor England.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The August 2021 report of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, makes clear that we already face global temperatures in excess of anything that our species has experienced previously. Since 1995, government representatives from around the world have gathered annually for the UN.
A point of order, please. It's your motion. If you would read that out, please. That's what we need.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Councillor England. It's just that I'm conscious that this is being YouTube. The members of the public don't have the motion in front of them, so they won't know what you're talking about.
That's right.
What I was going to say was it might be worth you reading your motion out and then talking to it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, thank you very much.
Can you hear me okay? Right. The wording of the motion for our friends on YouTube is climate emergency and COP26. Point number 1, Dacorum Borough Council notes that the important climate summit, COP26, is being held in Glasgow this November, with only 8 years remaining of the 10 that were available when the climate emergency was recognised and declared by this council. Point 2, Council also notes that the local response to the climate emergency, while capable of undertaking many urgent and useful actions within its powers and capacity, and able to energise local people and businesses, faces critical limitations in key areas for scaling up change, such as sufficient and adequate workforce, trained and scaled for deployment to install ground source and air source heat pumps and other innovative renewables and insulating technologies to reduce CO2 production in housing and other buildings. Also, funding for the front-loaded costs of insulation schemes and conversion to renewables of present carbon-intensive systems which are used in Dacorum, both by the council and by residents and businesses. Point 3, these work streams and others require urgent action by government to improve capacity for local authorities to draw on, particularly those authorities like Dacorum with large housing stock who are required to insulate buildings, adopt non-fossil fuel sources of heat and power, and to reduce and or recycle waste products safely and efficiently. Point 4 of 5. To ensure this council and others can undertake this critical work, local authorities need reassurance from government that they can confidently prepare budgets, knowing that capacity will be available. And the final point. Council agrees to ask the portfolio holder for environment to write to the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy and Alok Sharma, President of COP26, to urge a commitment on spending and timing for an urgent and effective scheme of investment in workforce training, technological innovation and industry standards to allow local government to make urgent progress in meeting its challenges meaningfully in the financial year 22-23 end.
Thank you, Councillor England. Councillor Burney.
No, I'm waiting for Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was waiting for Councillor England to finish his speech on the motion before intervening.
With your permission, Mayor.
Yes, Councillor England.
Thank you. The IPCC gave a stark warning, as I mentioned earlier, that we already face global temperatures in excess of anything that our species has previously experienced. You really have to listen to that statement and take a moment to take in what is being actually said. At COP26, hosted in Paris 5 years ago, the world leaders committed to a historic agreement to hold the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees centigrade, above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the rise to 1.5. They also agreed to step up efforts to adapt to the impacts of climate change and to make finance flows consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. The world has woken up to the need to curb emissions and invest in climate resilience. I'm reading from the website of COP26. This is how they present themselves. There's no doubt that this is a milestone moment, and the reason I propose this motion is because we have urgent work to accomplish in this council, and my group certainly aims to assist the council in making essential progress in tackling the climate emergency. So I welcome the seconding of this motion by the Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Environment and the comments that he's going to ask the Leader of the Council to also sign the letter. I'm hoping this Council will be able to come to a unanimous agreement at this meeting, just as with the declaration of the climate emergency, which we did in summer 2019. I want to take this, for me, I'm sure you'll agree, opportunity to do non-political, because this issue is too important to miss the opportunity that COP26 in November in Glasgow presents. This motion recognises the 10 years that we've had in 2019 is now 8 years. I looked up the physics of avoiding a crash, and I can tell you that in dry or perfect conditions, a car at 60 miles an hour can stop in 6.87 seconds without skidding. The first second of that is thinking time. I think that's enough maths for this meeting, but it's enough maths to tell us that our thinking time is now used up. So we need to be able to act at scale, and as a council in the coming budget for 2022-23. To do so, we need to see how, via central government, the necessary action can be funded and a suitable workforce applied to the transition in levels of insulation across our large stockholding and to renewable fuels and methods for heating. I note the comments earlier about the efforts to invest in heat pumps. The reason for using the examples of heat pumps and insulation is that these are mentioned by DBC officers in the report which went to the Strategic Planning and Environment Committee on the 21st of March 2021. On page 54, section 3, the report points out that DBC has a heavy reliance on government plans and progress, including offshore wind and solar, hydrogen, nuclear, and 600,000 heat pumps by 2028, for which the workforce doesn't currently exist to service them. Page 58 also states that the first phase being considered by the Council is a 5-year programme to tackle low-performing dwellings within the HRO RAID portfolio with a fabric-first approach, and this would concentrate on roofs, insulation, windows and ventilation. So my key point here is that we know that we need to begin spending money and we need to start taking action at quite some scale in the next financial year, and I'm anxious that we don't miss that opportunity because the government isn't ready. So just briefly, COP26 organisers urge us and all residents, some of whom may be listening tonight and watching, is to make your action count and inspire others to do their bit by sharing what you are doing using a hashtag Together for Our Planet and a hashtag OneStepGreener on social media, and joining others through what they call the Count Us In campaign. The Count Us In campaign picks out 16 things that we can all do, and they are: we can fly less, we can drive electric, we can insulate our homes, we can wear clothes to last, we can tell our politicians what we want them to do about climate emergency, we can walk and we can cycle more, we can cut food waste, we can green our money, which I think means spend our money on green things, we can repair and reuse, we can dial down the temperature or the energy use, we can speak up at work, we can talk to friends, we can eat more plants. I've tried to do this in the last week, and for me that's a really hard thing, but we can all exchange one meal a week for something that's got less meat in it. We can eat seasonal, we can switch our energy, and we can get some solar into our lives. I'm sure after the pandemic and restrictions on travel, we all want to get some solar into our lives, but we can do that in Cornwall. I want to mention the encouragement that I've had from the chair of SPAE, Councillor John Burney. Although I didn't quite have the confidence in his concept of being able to solve the energy problem with a combination of hydrogen and nuclear, which sounds rather dangerous to me, I hope I have understood the chair of the OSC in his email comment to me on 13th August when he wrote back. Anxiety about climate change is pretty universally shared, and I hope we can approach DBC policy on this matter in a constructive cross-party manner going forwards. Now, obviously there are safe limitations to constructive cross-party working as long as the Conservatives retain all the chairs of the scrutiny committees. But now that the Education Secretary has gone, perhaps we can relax just a tad about people marking their own homework. Just kidding, folks. The August 2021 report of the IPCC makes clear that we already face global temperatures in excess of anything human beings have experienced. Yes, I said it again. So I hope that COP26 will bring the enabling of local government action which will tackle the climate emergency and save residents from the cost of leaky homes which are heated with fossil fuels, which are only sure to get more expensive. As a council, we cannot make government policy, but when our officers report that government action is necessary for our plans to be credible, it is right that in the lead up to such an important summit, decorum speaks to power to say what it needs. And one more time, please feel free to join in if you've got this now. The August 2021 report of the IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change makes clear that we already face global temperatures in excess of anything human beings have previously experienced. What a statement.
Thank you, Councillor England. Councillor Burney?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's always a temptation for parties who are not in power, either locally or at Westminster, to make expensive demands on central government. However, the current motion reflects not only what my own Strategic Planning and the Environment Committee has advocated, but it is also in accordance with our Conservative Council's policy on the climate emergency. If we at local government level are to make a meaningful contribution to tackling climate change, then we do indeed need extra financial and training resources from central government urgently. I hope, therefore, that members on both sides of the chamber will support this motion without amendment, and I commend Councillor England for putting it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burney. Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too will be supporting this motion. I would just like to highlight a couple of things. First of all, the government has in fact been running a scheme, I think, since 2014, but I am prepared to be amended on that. I already said earlier I'm not good on figures and dates. And that was where people could get their homes in the private sector insulated and their lofts insulated. I personally have taken up that option. Didn't do the loft because I had to empty the loft first, and that was a no-go at the moment. But I do think we as a council, as part of our remit, being leaders in our area, should be encouraging the residents to do what they can in the private sector with their homes to make them compliant. Just as I've said earlier, we're doing that with the social housing in the borough. And we have a plan going forward. Yes, it won't be done by 2030, but we do have to strike that balance between building homes that people need and repairing and future-proofing, if you like, and decarbonising the houses and homes that we already have. And I think we also have to remember these are people's homes. We can't just pile in and say, we're going to do this, 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 and this. It is still their home. It's our houses, it's their homes. So I always get a bit nervous. I understand why the motion is written the way it's written, and I do support it. We do need more money, just like Councillor Burney has said. But you also have to remember that the housing account is ring-fenced. So unless it's just giving us the money in the budget, it's not going to solve the problem from the housing perspective, because we can't dip into the general fund, just as the general fund can't dip into the housing revenue account. So at the moment, the money is coming out of the rent that we get from our residents or any grants that we can get. And like I said, any grants that are coming up, we're going for. But I do always get worried when social housing is always highlighted as the big issue, because it almost feels like we're picking on our tenants, we're stigmatising social tenants, which I don't think is the point of the motion. But I would just like to highlight that. This is an issue, and I've already been speaking to officers about this, that we need to get that communication going out to our residents, just like what we're doing with social housing that we own. And we already know that the housing associations are doing the same sort of thing in the area, so all social housing. We need to be having that conversation with our residents that they do their bit as well. And I heard once that you need to tell someone at least 7 times in different formats before they actually start to take that message on board. So perhaps it's something we could do when, hopefully, we can get rid of that COVID strap line at the bottom of all our emails. Perhaps we could get something on climate change on the bottom of all those emails, so that we're getting that message out every way we possibly can, through our social media accounts, through the email addresses, the replies, etc. But I would just like to, I agree that I think we should give it the gravitas that it deserves, and that the Leader of the Council should also sign this, but I don't think it's worth amending the motion for that. We'll just get him to do it anyway. He'll just have to do as he's told. But other than that, yes, I'm happy to support the amendment. To support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Pringle, we have no time.
Thank you. Oh, can I be heard? Am I on mic? Yes.
Fine,
I just
thank you.
wanted to thank Councillor England for writing and proposing such a motion of such vital importance to the futures of all our children and all generations to come, and also my colleagues right across the chamber of all political persuasions, who have spoken so far in favour of the motion, and all who are going to vote for the motion, because I hope that in demonstrating unity on this vital issue, we can send the message to our residents that we all recognise that man-made climate change is happening and that this is now beyond debate and that urgent action is now required. As Councillor England said, in August we were warned by the UN Climate Panel in a landmark report that global warming is dangerously close to spiralling out of control and that the world is already certain to face further disruption for decades, if not centuries to come. We've all seen the deadly heat waves, the fires, the hurricanes that have damaged wildlife across Australia, Western USA, and the melting of the permafrost. But we also have evidence of climate change right across every region of our own United Kingdom. A few weeks ago, I visited the Puffin colony on Rathlin Island, just off the coast of Northern Ireland, and I was informed by the RSPB that the puffin population is in decline now because of the loss of sand eels, because of the change in ocean currents. Similarly, salmon fishermen are saying that salmon population is going down. This is really happening all around us. And we are currently last in Europe, according to new data, in sales of energy efficient heat pumps. A lot of our climate emissions are due directly to our homes. So this is such an important motion. And I'm very glad that we're all coming together, because every individual, every business, every family has to do their duty across the board in addressing climate change. But we also need government action at every level, and that goes from international cooperation through Westminster, funding proper granular behaviour at local levels. So I feel our residents will all be heartened to see us this evening coming together, standing together and urging real practical action which will contribute to the global human cause of saving our planet. And I urge you all to vote this evening in favour of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pringle. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm delighted that there is unanimity on this motion. I just wanted to say a few words and draw attention of the members and the public to some important features of trying to reduce carbon. The motion is calling for a commitment by government to invest on investment to support innovation. While it's necessary in some sectors, in others, the issue to support the implementation of what the Energy Savings Trust calls cost-effective renewable technology, stuff that is already tried and tested. I've got here a bar chart, which I've taken from the Energy Savings Trust portal. It's dated a bit, 2017, but it's the most recent stuff that they have. The borough has been, and it shows the average household energy use. The borough has been championing the amount of recycling we achieve, which is very laudable. But the chart shows that home heating represents about 9 times the amount of carbon generated by waste, at about 2.7 tons a year. Now that's a huge amount of carbon. 2.7 tons, or 2,745 kgs per annum. Now this is long gone of the days when residents took delivery of tons of coal and disposed of the resultant ash. We are disassociated from what burning gas actually means to the public. If we are to decarbon heating, we've got to support the alternative renewable solutions and dramatically improve insulation standards of the existing housing stock. I think we're all agreed on that, judging by the comments tonight. This is nothing new. The Energy Savings Trust says heat pumps will be critical if the UK is to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Just to put it into numbers, to achieve this target, the average UK household must reduce its carbon emissions from heating from 2,745 kgs annually to just 138 kgs. Now that's a 95% reduction. Don't know how it's going to happen, but this is the direction of travel. In the private sector, currently, installations of heat pumps is being supported by the Renewable Heat Incentive Scheme. This is like the feed-in tariff on solar panels and pays a quarterly sum over 7 years, and it largely pays for the installation. The grant runs out on the 31st of March, and its replacement has not yet been confirmed. The industry believes it will be part of the publicity for COP26. In addition to supporting the motion, picking up on what Councillor Griffiths was saying, I'd like the Council to identify users who have already installed heat pumps and put their stories into the Decorum Digest and our social media to encourage others. The government has a stated ambition to install 600,000 heat pumps a year. The public needs to understand the scale of the challenge and what net zero means in terms of carbon reduction. The motion calls for government to invest in effective schemes to meet the challenge, and I urge members to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor England, for bringing this motion before full council. I too would like to add my vote for this particular motion, but I would also like the opportunity to acknowledge some of the hard work that we've already done through our climate change agenda, and in particular I'd like to draw people's attention to the Decorum CAN, that's the Climate Action Network that's being publicised today, going live, that's part of the community engagement around climate change, and I would urge members and residents to sign up and to follow the links both on social media and through our website. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Banks. I think we seem to have a general sort of united support on this. Would the mover of the motion care to sum up at all, or do you want to go straight to a vote? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to ask whether the seconder wants to speak to the motion. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Then I'll briefly sum up. Thank you, everyone who has spoken for your support for the motion. As I said before, I think it's really good that the suggestion has been made that the leader of the council also signs the letter. Always difficult to know what to ask for precisely in these matters. Thanks to Councillor Burney for his comments, and I think it's right to pay tribute to his chairmanship of SPEI, which has attempted to advance these issues, difficult as some of them are to advance. Councillor Griffiths slightly alarmed me, I have to say, by saying that she didn't think the work would be done by 2030. I hope I didn't misunderstand that, because obviously 2030 is a very important date, and we absolutely need to have a can-do attitude on what the task that lies ahead of us. We have spent 2 years making plans. I would anticipate that the stock condition survey can't be far off, because obviously we have been working on it for some time. She's absolutely right to say that those are our houses, but they're our people's homes. I just looked at the 600,000 figure. Obviously, we're not necessarily expecting every home of every type to be equipped and heated by a heat pump. Certainly, especially not a ground source heat pump, because I understand they require digging up your garden rather. But there are air source alternatives, which are much more, which are much easier and less invasive. But if you actually look at the numbers, the 600,000 number, and divide that by the number of local authorities, you come to 1,900. So to put some local scale on it, that's 1,900 per year is the run rate that we're looking for. When you look at it that way, it's not a massive number. We need the workforce, and that's exactly the reason for the motion. And I'm sure that COP will become a focus for all sorts of announcements. I do sincerely hope that there is a replacement scheme for the Renewable Heat Incentive Scheme. I'm quite sure that must be the case. And absolutely, for anyone who's watching or anyone who's watching on the playback of this, check out Decorum Can. It's been on the social media today, and I'm sure it will be on again on the council's Facebook and Twitter and YouTube channels. Check it out and see how you can get involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor England. As we have no amendments, I think we can move straight to a vote on this, and we will vote by a show of hands. So could I ask those in favour of the motion to please indicate by raising your hand? Thank you. Thank you. That is unanimous. The motion is carried. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item 6, questions. There are none. Agenda item 7, business from the last council meeting. There is none. Agenda item 8, cabinet referrals. There are none. Agenda item 9, overview and scrutiny committee referrals. There are none. Agenda item 10, changes to committee membership. I don't believe we have any.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I beg your pardon, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, we have one. Could I ask that Councillor Roxanne Ransley replaces me on housing and resource housing and whatever it is. Housing and communities. That's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tyndall. I'm sure that's acceptable. Agenda item 11, changes to committee dates. Now we have a couple of dates, I believe, Councillor Griffiths. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the Strategic Planning, Environment, Overview and Scrutiny Committee from the 20th of October to the 2nd of November. That agreed? Thank you. And I would also like to put in members' diary an extraordinary council meeting on Wednesday, the 6th of October. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Well, that concludes the agenda for this evening's meeting, and therefore I declare the meeting closed. Right. Okay. Okay. Yes, I know.